afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mimiko Kim, Director of Communications and Operations at the Japan International Transport and Tourism Institute. I'm so sorry, it's been a long morning. We also call it GT. Thank you very much for your interest and attendance today. Please make your way to your seats if you have not done so already. Please note that this event is conducted in both English and Japanese. You'll find English on channel 1 and Japanese on channel 2 at your headsets. If there are any problems with your headsets, please find a member of our staff who can assist you. For those who are joining us virtually, you're able to choose your preferred language at the bottom of your screen. 皆様こんにちは。
English testing. Thank you for joining us. Testing, English. English, testing. Testing, English. Thank you for joining us. This is English. Channel 1. English channel. Testing. Testing, English. English, testing.
お選びください。それではこれから同時通訳を開始します。Today's event timeline, speaker bios, and guest surveys can be found through our website at jittIusa.org. Guests attending in person may use the Wi-Fi information found on the screen through the Ronald Reagan Building with the username and password. Please allow me to welcome you to today's symposium, which is being held with the support from the Nippon Foundation, the Embassy of Japan in the United States, and the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center. We thank each of these organizations for their generous support. To open our symposium, Mr. Masafumi Shukuri, Chairman of GT and the Japan International Transport and Tourism Research Institute, would like to make some remarks. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Shukuri.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Masafumi Shukuri, Chairman of JTTRY, Japan Transport and Tourism Research Institute, and of JITTI, Japan International Transport and Tourism Institute. I would like to thank everyone who took time out of their busy schedule to join today's symposium in person and online. First of all, I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Honorable Koji Tomita, Ambassador of Japan to the United States, for taking time out of his busy official schedule to attend this symposium. I would also like to express my deepest gratitude to our 4 keynote speakers. Ms. Annie Peterson, Assistant Secretary, Aviation and International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Mr. Toshiyuki Onuma, Senior Deputy Director General, Japan Civil Aviation Bureau at Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism. Ms. Heidi Gomez, Acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. And Mr. Jeff Marutien, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. In addition, I'd like to thank all of our distinguished 8 panelists. As moderator, Mr. Steve Sonka from the Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuels Initiative, CAFI. Ms. Sherry Wilson from Delta Airlines. Mr. Tom Michaels from United Airlines. Mr. Tadashi Matsushita from All Nippon Airways. Mr. Makoto Maezawa from Japan Airlines. Mr. Jimmy Samartis from Lanzajetto, Mr. Saburo Takeuchi from Mitsubishi Corporation, and Dr. William Ledger from the World Bank. In March of this year, our institute hosted a symposium in Washington, D.C. as an official event for the annual Washington Cherry Blossom Festival. The theme was exchange and tourism between Japan and the United States. This symposium emphasized the extremely importance of multi-layered and wide-ranging people-to-people exchange between Japan and the United States in order to grow and strengthen the Japan-US relationship. We had a lively and fruitful discussion on how the Japanese and American parties should proceed in the future to rebuild and strengthen these people-to-people exchanges and elevate them to a higher level. Today's symposium is an extension of this March's discussions on how Japan and the United States should respond to climate change issues, which will be vital to achieving aviation sustainability that supports Japan-US exchange. It goes without saying that air transportation between Japan and the United States is an essential means of multi-layered and wide-ranging people-to-people exchanges in various fields, such as politics, economics, academics, culture, and tourism, and that the resulting exchanges have greatly contributed to the development of Japan-US relations. In addition, air transportation between Japan and the United States has supported the peace and stability of the entire region by connecting North America and the Indo-Pacific region via Japan, creating benefits of expanding exchanges and economic development. In this way, the air transport between Japan and the United States, which serves as fundamental infrastructure for the economic security of the Indo-Pacific region, has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic in an unprecedented manner, as you may recall. Fortunately, since then, with the end of the pandemic, international passenger traffic has resumed, and the International Air Transport Association, IATA, announced at its annual general meeting in June this year that the global air passenger demand is expected to recover to 4.35 billion in 2023. This is 96% of the pre-pandemic figure from 2019. Thus, demand is expected to return to near pre-pandemic level. From the economic perspective, the upward trend for air travel is very favorable. This is true for aviation business as well as for expanding international exchanges. On the other hand, from the perspective of combating climate change, an increase in the number of international flights is a major issue as it leads to an increase of CO2 emissions. At its general meeting last October, the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, agreed to an ambitious goal of achieving carbon neutrality in international aviation by 2050. In order to achieve this goal, further efforts will be required from all concerned bodies. At today's symposium, we will discuss the realization of carbon neutrality, which is the most pressing and important issue in the aviation field. while taking into account the importance of transportation between Japan and the United States and its special significance for economic security. I would like to consider this issue together with you. Finally, I hope that today's symposium will provide useful suggestions for solving the issue of climate change in the aviation sector, and that it will also encourage cooperation between Japan and the United States to solve this matter together. I would like to conclude my remarks by wishing that this will lead to further development of Japan and United States. Thank you very much for joining this symposium.
Thank you, Chairman Shigurdi. Now I have the honor to introduce to you the Ambassador of Japan to the United States, Koji Tomita. Ambassador Tomita was appointed to his current position in 2021, but has a long history of working to better international relations, including previous assignments as Ambassador to South Korea, Ambassador to the State of Israel, and Minister in the United Kingdom, as well as here in Washington, D.C. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Well, thank you very much for that gracious introduction. It's really great to be here. I would like to start by congratulating Chairman Shigurdi and all those involved for holding the U.S.-Japan Civil Aviation Symposium in person for the first time in 4 years, I understand. My office is very pleased to support this event following the hugely successful the U.S.-Japan Tourism Symposium held in March of this year. This symposium is very timely because I'm told the year 2023 marks the 70th anniversary of the entry into force of the U.S.-Japan Civil Air Transport Agreement. And since the agreement took effect, as you know, air routes between Japan and the United States have been gradually expanded, and it has been nearly 40 years since the first flight to Washington, D.C., nation's capital. Having spent a good part of my diplomatic career on Japan-US relations, I don't have to tell you, I have been a very frequent flyer on that particular service. I believe that the expansion of the aviation link is a testament to the deepening cooperation between Japan and the United States. Indeed, it has supported the phenomenal increase in human exchanges between our two countries, which have in turn provided a critical foundation for a bilateral partnership. If I may tell a little bit about my own story, back in 1977, when I was a sophomore, college, I had a great fortune to be accepted as a national student at Davidson College, North Carolina. I still remember how excited I was boarding on a Pan Am flight in the old Haneda airport. Narita wasn't open until the following year. And the flight took me first to Anchorage for refueling, then to New York, where I caught an Eastern flight to Charlotte. And by the way, the Charlotte airport back then was a very small provincial airport about the size of a high school gymnasium. All this is, of course, an ancient history, but I'm deeply gratified to see our airline service continuing to bring our peoples closer together. I will always say our alliance is built from ground up, founded on multiple layers of connections encompassing broad areas from security to business, from culture to grassroots. And I cannot overstate the importance of the role played by well-functioning aviation links in building those connections. Although face-to-face exchanges were seriously impacted by the pandemic, there has been significant recovery in air traffic between our two countries. Challenges remain as we try to consolidate our recovery, including the recent trends in exchange rates and the rise in flight prices. But we are fully committed to the goal of further promotion of tourism between our two countries, and we are delighted to be able to designate the coming year, 2024, as Japan-US Tourism Year in close cooperation with the US government. That said, it goes without saying, aviation cooperation between the two countries should look beyond bilateral issues and come to grips with the broader challenges facing international society. Looking at our world today, many parts of the world are still reeling from the devastating impact of the global pandemic. Russian aggression against Ukraine has shaken the international order to its very foundations. All these developments have contributed to heightened uncertainty and geopolitical tension in the world over. So under these circumstances, I believe that maintaining and strengthening connectivity in the aviation sector is extremely important, not only for ourselves, but the whole world. Japan and the United States, two leading nations in global aviation, should work together toward this goal. Equally important is the task of working out effective response to climate change in the field of international aviation. As Chairman Shukuri noted, last year ICAO adopted a long-term global aspirational goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. Again, Japan and the United States should lead global efforts to realize this ambitious vision. In this context, it is timely and welcome that this symposium provides an opportunity for the stakeholders of our two countries to deepen a conversation on aviation sustainability, including how we can work together to expand and secure sustainable aviation fuel. So finally, let me conclude by expressing my deep gratitude to all of you for the robust bilateral cooperation taking place in the aviation sector, and by expressing my sincere hope that this symposium will contribute to our joint efforts to work for an even stronger partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Tomita. Ambassador Tomita is now leaving, and we thank him again for his attendance today. This symposium consists of 3 opportunities to hear from experts in the fields of aviation, government, finance, and manufacturing in the forms of keynote speeches and 2 panel discussions, with a short coffee break to be held after both the keynote speeches and the first panel. Our first keynote speaker today is Annie Petsonk, Assistant Secretary of Aviation and International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Ms. Petsonk is a recognized expert on international aviation and climate change. She has previously worked in the Executive Office of the President, the Department of Justice, the United Nations, the private bar, and as an adjunct professor at the George Washington University Law School. We are grateful for her presence today. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Petsonk to the stage.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Thank you, Chairman Shikuri. To all those here, konnichiwa. To all those listening in Japan, ohayo gozaimasu. Good afternoon, and thank you all for your attention and interest It's wonderful to be here today with colleagues from around the world speaking on a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Those of you who know me know that I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, Altoona, Pennsylvania, where we had and still have, a one-gate airport. And that one-gate airport was and is our gateway to the United States and to the world. My father was a pilot and an engineer, and he instilled in me a love for and awe of flight. He really showed me that aviation is a way to connect people and that we need to make it work for people. Safety is and must always be aviation's North Star. As commercial air travel has grown, our sector has had to navigate novel technologies and increasingly complex operating environments, including greater speeds, higher altitudes, and more congested airspace. Through an unwavering focus on safety, commercial aviation has earned the public's trust over decades. If aviation had not delivered on safety, it would not have earned its license to operate. As it rose to meet the challenge of safety, the aviation sector must now rise to meet the challenge of sustainability. That will take unwavering focus also. The aviation sector can and must deliver on the promise of a net zero future. If it fails, it risks losing the public's trust and consequently its global license to operate. This is the aviation challenge of our generation. Let me set the scene for today's conversation by sketching first the scope of the challenge, and second, how we can and must collaborate internationally, and how two great partners, Japan and the United States, can work together, for our shared leadership will be crucial to the success of the global endeavor. The scope of the challenge. The aviation sector today is responsible for about 3 to 4% of global carbon dioxide emissions. But aviation's warming impact is bigger because soot particles coming out of the backs of jet engines cause clouds to form, and according to the best estimates of scientists, the heat trapped by those clouds roughly doubles the warming impact. And as the demand for air travel increases, that warming effect will increase unless we act. We all share the goal of the Paris Agreement, limiting warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. If aviation were a country, it would be a top 10 emitter globally. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization's expert panel, estimates that if international aviation continues with 2018 technology, operations, and fuels, it could use up to 7% of the world's global carbon budget by 2050 and up to almost 20% by 2070. In light of this analysis, last year, the member states of ICAO's assembly took two important steps. First, they adopted a long-term aspirational goal of net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. This goal, also embraced by the aviation industry, signals to the rest of the private sector that there is a strong political consensus on the need for aviation climate action. Second, the ICAO member states renewed their commitment to CORSIA, the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation. CORSIA requires all international airlines to measure and report their emissions, and on routes between participating countries to reduce their net emissions to 85% of their 2019 emissions levels. As we heard earlier, aviation air travel is coming back, international travel is coming back, and we expect that air travel and emissions will meet and surpass 2019 levels very soon. CORSIA gives operators great flexibility in choosing how to meet their responsibilities. They can use more efficient aircraft, improve their operations, fly using sustainable aviation fuels, and as a gap filler, retire high-integrity carbon offsets. CORSIA is a critical part of the international aviation sector's path to sustainability, a path that spurs new technologies, even as it respects the foundational principles of fair competition. CORSIA's standards and recommended practices set ground rules for sustainable aviation fuel and carbon credits, and these standards are a model for other hard-to-abate sectors like maritime shipping. I'm proud that both Japan and the United States have joined the more than 100 ICAO member states that have volunteered for CORSIA's initial phase. The expansion of sustainable aviation fuel lies at the heart of both CORSIA and the long-term aspirational goal. And it provides a powerful example of how we, the United States and Japan, can and must work together on this great challenge. ICAO's landmark expert report on the long-term aspirational goal estimates that about 2/3 of the emission reductions needed to meet the goal will have to come from sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. Other studies, including those by industry, have made similar findings. In 7 short weeks from now, ICAO will hold the 3rd major conference on alternative aviation fuels, known as CAF 3. The United Arab Emirates will host the conference, which is symbolically sandwiched between 2 other major meetings in United Arab Emirates, the Dubai Air Show and COP28, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, 28th Conference of the Parties. The United States and Japan are working closely together in preparation for CAF 3. We are working with other like-minded states to obtain a CAF 3 outcome that will send a strong signal to private investors whose capital is needed to construct the new facilities to produce SAF. Those facilities are needed now if we're going to reach the sufficient scale that we must for SAF. In the intensive run-up to CAF 3, states will need to decide what form this signal will take and how states should assist each other in the shared effort to expand the global production of SAF. First, on the form of the signal. The United States seeks a robust signal that can prompt investment by those within and outside of the aviation sector, a signal that tells private sector financiers and the oil industry, you can do well by doing good through investments in high-integrity SAF. A numeric value, a clear metric that the broader public can understand, that is keyed into the near term, not just the long term, that provides a signal from a broad rather than a narrow grouping of countries, are what we seek, and the U.S. will work with valued partners, including Japan, to ensure the November conference sends that signal. Second, the United States believes that technical assistance and capacity building conducted at bilateral and multilateral levels are crucial cornerstones of the effort to expand the global supply of SAF. Over the past year, the United States and Japan have held informal exchanges about our respective policies to advance sustainable fuels, and working closely with the exceptional Onuma-san and his terrific team, we are also coordinating at policymaking fora to great success. We're working together on a new concept known as Aviation Green Lanes, which we hope will further the uptake of SAF on flights between our states. Aviation's energy transition is a challenge and an opportunity. Most of the world's jet fuel is produced in a handful of countries today, derived from a commodity sourced in an even smaller number of countries. An aviation system powered by low and zero emitting fuels is essential for humanity to keep flying and thriving on our blue marble, and it will create thousands of good paying jobs. A future powered by sustainable aviation is a future with economic opportunity for Japan, for the United States, and for our partners around the world. If we get this right, soon I'll be able to land at that one-gate airport in Altoona, flying on sustainable aviation fuel, and you will too. Thank you for working together to make that vision a reality.
Thank you, Ms. Pesong. Our next speaker will be Toshiyuki Onuma, Senior Deputy Director General of the Civil Aviation Bureau at the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism of Japan, or MLIT. Mr. Onuma has continuously worked in the field of international civil aviation at the MLIT since 1992. As the Director of the Aviation Industry Division and the Director of the International Air Transport Division, he gained valuable experience with various policy issues in relation to airline businesses and engaged in bilateral air talks between JCAB and the civil aviation authorities of various states. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Onuma.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 日本の皆様おはようございます。
Good morning to everyone in Japan.
Opportunity to frankly discuss the most imminent topic in this industry in the world, in particular with one of my most respected colleague, Ms. Annie Peterson, and other distinguished speakers from U.S. governments and industries. As my contribution to today's discussion, I would like to briefly introduce our current Japanese policies and goals in this field in the context of the inter-Pacific traffic. Sorry. Yes. Firstly, it should be mentioned that traffic between Japan and the United States has, in principle, already has been recovered to the level of before COVID-19. See the number of the flights between mainland of the United States and Japan as indicated in continental flight. Already the number is exceeding the level of before COVID-19. In addition, it should be useful to mention in the context of today's topic, about 1/3 of the traffic is between Japan and California. The state always the center of the trend of this subject. I remember at the end of September of last year, I announced to participants in the ICAO assembly that we finally decided to lift our border control and restart welcoming those who are interested to come to Japan. At that time, the top prioritized agenda in my task in charge of international aviation was exactly how and when we did that. Now, as you may imagine, how to greener these recovered traffic in line with the goals set by the ICAO Assembly last year, as mentioned my previous speaker, is needless to say our top priority to deal with. For the sake of this goal, what we did first was setting the intermediate goals and floors to coordinate how to realize them among stakeholders. In this context, we set the target as replacing 10% of the fuel consumed by Japanese airlines with SAF by year 2030 and established public-private council with the purpose to facilitate domestic SAF production, to construct SAF supply chains including imported SAF. We are aiming to set future projection of supply and demand and established policies of regulation and support for that purpose. As for membership, I should emphasize it also invites Board of Airline representative in Japan to join, and on this basis, Delta's Victor-san and United's Takahashi-san actually attended last meeting as its representative. And as for public sector, key ministries, as in the United States, Energy Agency, in METI, Ministry of Environment, and Ministry of Agriculture also joined. Through analysis by this council, we have reached to the provisional projection of demand and supply in Japan by year 2030. The figure includes domestic as well as international traffic by Japanese and foreign carriers. While future alignment with the revised Corsia baseline set by the last ICAO assembly will be necessary, in principle, we could see supply potential would well cover the expected demand in short-time basis. Therefore, how to materialize and realize this projection through policy tools is the task we Japanese government need to address. Key objective of this policy could be rephrased as here. Firstly, securing SAF manufacturing capacity and feedstock supply chain. Secondly, establishing a stable supply system for SAF at the price of global competitiveness. Thirdly, setting legal target for the use and supply of SAF with government support. To achieve these objectives, what kind of policy approach we should exercise? The mandatory scheme like Europe or a supporting scheme like United States? Our current answer is hybrid. As for regulation side, we set 10% target. Just a moment. As for regulation side, we set 10% target for both supplier and airlines. The legal nature of the target, namely legally binding or a voluntary declaration with authorization by authorities, are various. However, it's important that Japanese stakeholders have already been in the position to announce their commitment. As for support side, subsidies for capital expenditures on initial investment for facilities and feedstock supply chain have already prepared and executed by the fund managed by Energy Agency or investment by our Financial Mezzanine Institute, Japan Overseas Infrastructure Investment Corporation for Transport and Urban Development. The name is JOIN. Subsidies for operating expenditure is also under consideration. While what menus and how and which levels these should be executed are needed to be further considered, the most possible tool to be adopted will be tax exemption or reduction for importing feedstock for SAF production. Lastly, research and development. Further instruction of support for the production from second generation ethanol, algae, and waste is considered. And this slide shows how the Japanese major players in oil industry announced their plans and goals to materialize the figures shown in my previous slide by 2030. I assume later, Mr. Takeuchi will introduce his Mitsubishi's investment strategy in detail. While we deploy various studies, discussions, coordination among Japanese stakeholders in this field, we are contributing to the discussions in ICAO and other major industry arena in the international arena to promote and enhance the development of the decarbonization. How do we encourage the Global South to commit to decarbonization in line with long-term aspirational goals set by ICAO is one of the important issues we should address. And in this connection, we are actively participate in the capacity building activities organized by ICAO, namely Act South. Lastly, as introduced by my previous speaker, I would like to briefly introduce the concept of green lane, which has originally proposed by my other like-minded country, Singapore, and currently jointly considered and discussed among Japan, United States, and Singapore. It's aiming the traffics between like-minded and committed states for decarbonization to be supported and enhanced by the actions by these states. Such actions would address to those of airlines, air traffic management, and airport of such states. What kind of a policy tool would be involved, whether involved tools be coordinated between participating states, and what kind of framework should be set as the basis of this concept is still subject to the further study and discussion. However, we believe it would be a strong driving force to greening the traffic among, in particular, in Indo-Pacific, if successfully materialized. Don't you think it would be marvelous if this slide will be realized and expanded to all over the region? This is all of my presentation. I hope this would be of assistance to our discussions in the following sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Onuma. We will now have the pleasure of hearing from Heidi Gomez, Acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Ms. Gomez recently joined the Bureau of Economics and Business Affairs after becoming the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Transportation Affairs at the U.S. State Department in July 2023. She is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service with 25 years of experience serving at U.S. embassies in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Thank you so much for that very gracious introduction. They thought I had a PowerPoint presentation, but I will spare you. Chairman Shukuri-san, Ambassador Tomita, Assistant Secretary Pitsong, Deputy Director General Onuma-san, Senior Advisor Marutian, distinguished panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the U.S. Department of State, I am absolutely delighted to be here and thank you for the very warm welcome. I want to start by acknowledging the fact that the U.S.-Japan alliance is the cornerstone of peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. Our bilateral relationship has never been stronger, and we have built a truly global partnership based on that cooperation. Our close relationship has provided security and stability for our countries as well as the wider region. And that stability, in turn, provides the foundation for the deep economic relationship that our two countries have enjoyed for decades. Japan's global leadership is essential to the growth of aviation and advancing tourism in the Asia-Pacific. And the reason that the future of the Asia-Pacific region is so bright is because there are so many stakeholders like JITI and each and every one of you here who are all looking for new ways to expand travel from, within, and to the region. Air transport has long been a cornerstone of our relationship. It's not only connected our people, businesses, and cultures, but it has also been a conduit for diplomacy. It has also reinvigorated the tourism sector by establishing additional air routes throughout the region. And during the challenging times that we've all experienced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, air transport remained a vital lifeline for essential travel. In times of crisis, the aviation sector came through, showing that it is absolutely indispensable for rapid response, disaster relief, as well as humanitarian assistance. Air transport has also played a pivotal role in enhancing security cooperation between our two nations, and this is particularly vital in the Asia-Pacific region, where the strategic partnership between our two countries has served as a stabilizing force. The Biden administration's unwavering commitment to addressing climate change places sustainability at the forefront of our diplomatic, economic, and even security agendas. The State Department is actively working with our international partners to implement initiatives aimed at reducing the environmental impact of aviation and promoting sustainability. So allow me to give you one quick example. Japan and the United States are both partners in the Blue Dot Network initiative, working together to design a mechanism to certify quality, sustainable infrastructure, including airports, to help attract more private sector investment into high-quality projects in emerging markets. And one of the pilot projects that we are using to test the BDN framework is an airport renovation that is enhancing its energy efficiency while at the same time minimizing its environmental impact. Domestically, the Biden administration has called for increasing SAF production in the United States to at least 3 billion gallons per year by 2030. And the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act includes two key provisions to help us get there. And that is a tax credit for SAF production and research and development grants to fund initiatives that make, transport, blend, or store SAF, along with projects to develop more fuel-efficient aircraft. Moreover, recent SAF supply agreements with major airlines like Delta, United, American, Southwest, Alaska Air, and even JetBlue showcase how partnerships with key industry players can drive progress. For example, United has made significant investments in SAF production and deployment, and they notably became the first U.S. airline to purchase sustainable fuels overseas. Through partnerships with SAF producers and suppliers, United and 5 corporate partners are investing $100 million to launch a fund backing sustainable aviation fuel. This is incredible progress, but we have to do more. Scientists have been telling us for decades that climate change is a matter of utmost urgency and concern. And as this summer really demonstrated to a lot of us, rising temperatures, extreme weather events, melting ice caps, and sea level rise are just some of the indicators that are really demonstrating the need for decisive action. And this need for collaboration and capacity building among member states such as Japan and the United States, as well as industry players, cannot be underestimated. And we must continue to work together through capacity building, assistance, as well as training programs. Assistant Secretary Petsonk earlier already touched on the great work that's happening in ICAO, so allow me to address some of the outcomes in recent discussions at the UN General Assembly, specifically with regards to the preparations for COP28. One of the key takeaways from the discussions is the growing awareness of the urgent need to phase out fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have been a primary driver of greenhouse gas emissions, and their continued use impacts our planet's climate sustainability. The UNGA discussions underscored the need for a concerted effort to transition to cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. And the world is looking to COP28 as a litmus test for our collective commitment to achieve the Paris Agreement's temperature goal. And this is going to be an opportunity for countries to not only set more ambitious emissions targets, but also to ensure that these targets are indeed accompanied by concrete actions. It's our hope that nations will join the United States and Japan to come together and work toward the common goal of advancing these sustainability efforts. And in doing so, we can ensure sustainability of the aviation sector in the years to come. Thank you again, Chairman Shukuri-san, for hosting the symposium today. With your leadership and that of stakeholders gathered here today, I look forward to the future of aviation in our markets, and I also look forward to working with you and many others here today to reach ICAO's goal of reaching net zero emissions in our industry by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. Our final keynote speaker will be Jeff Marutian, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. Prior to his current position, Mr. Marutian served as Senior Advisor to the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, as well as Special Assistant to the President in the Biden-Harris White House. His background is sustainable transportation technologies is further highlighted by his earlier work as the Director of the District Department of Transportation and as Assistant Secretary for Administration and Chief Sustainability Officer at the U.S. Department of Transportation in the Obama-Biden administration. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Marutian to the stage.
Okay. Good afternoon. It is very exciting to be here with all of you to talk about a topic that we at the U.S. Department of Energy are very excited about, very interested in, and particularly interested in furthering our partnerships with many of the folks that are here in this room. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here, appreciate the opportunity to be here with some of my distinguished colleagues in the Biden-Harris administration, with whom I've had the pleasure of working on SAF and furthering our efforts with biofuels specifically. So I want to talk just briefly a little bit about the commitments that we've made in the Biden-Harris administration and at the Department of Energy specifically to further the work for sustainable fuels broadly. It's important to note that at the Department of Energy, we're focused on decarbonizing all of our hardest to decarbonize areas. That includes buildings, industrial processes, and the entire transportation system, all modes. And we know that the hardest among those is, of course, the aviation sector. And in order to do that, we know that partnerships and collaboration are essential. We know that partnerships here with our industry colleagues, with organized labor, with states, municipalities, tribes, are all key to securing the needed supply chain and putting in place all of the necessary economic factors to produce sustainable aviation fuels and to really make it viable. We also know that international collaboration is important and is key, and that's why I think it's so incredibly helpful to have forums like this where we can come together to talk about many of the issues and challenges and key goals that we have mutually. The Department of Energy and our 17 national labs have been leading the way in research and development in biofuels for many, many years. Our national labs have state-of-the-art facilities and have really pushed the envelope in looking at biofuels broadly. We are very fortunate to have President Biden's leadership and have him champion two really critical laws for us, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, which gave us the financial tools to take that research and development and scale it to demonstrations and deployment. And so we are now able to put resources behind taking that R&D and bringing it to life. And I'm going to talk about just a few examples of that. At the Department of Energy, we've launched what we call Earth Shots. And they are based on President Kennedy's moonshot. Several years ago, we launched a sunshot to bring the cost of solar energy down dramatically by 90%. In 2011, the cost of solar energy was considerably higher than it is today, and that's because we focused all of our resources and attention on doing everything that we could to create an ecosystem that would bring the cost down. we've recently launched a Clean Products and Fuels shot. And with resources from the Inflation Reduction Act, we stood up a new facility at our Idaho National Lab focused on biomass feedstock. All of the tools that are necessary for us to test feedstock, to secure the supply chain that's necessary, to ensure that our processes are decarbonizing along with the fuel outcomes themselves. All of that now lives at a state-of-the-art research facility, which we cut the ribbon on just a few months ago. All of that is in support of our SAF Grand Challenge, which I know many of you are familiar with. As has been noted, the U.S. currently uses about 21 billion gallons of commercial jet fuel, and this market is projected to grow to over 35 billion gallons by 2050. And so we know that the demand for sustainable aviation fuel is there. Our job is to support all of the necessary components of bringing it to market. So our SAF Grand Challenge is a whole of government approach to overcoming some of those barriers, to establishing a resilient, sustainable aviation fuel industry. And our goals, as my colleague noted, are aggressive. 3 billion gallons of SAF by 2030, on the way to 2050, where we hope to achieve 35 billion gallons. So what we need to do in order to get there is take all of the opportunities we can to test, to collaborate, and I'm excited to see many of the industry partners, certainly as was noted by Deputy Assistant Secretary Gomez, companies like United who are here, but companies that are also doing some cutting edge work in partnership like LanzaJet with the Department of Energy. Very excited to see you here and for the continued partnership and collaboration that I know we'll have going forward. It is going to take a whole of government approach, but it's also really going to take a whole of industry approach too. And so we're looking forward to the rest of this day, but also really looking forward to what we know will be further collaboration to help us achieve these important milestones. So thank you so much. Very honored to be here and honored to have this conversation with all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marutian. We'd like to now have a 10-minute coffee break. Please feel free to stretch your legs, enjoy some coffee and cookies in the foyer. Next on the agenda will be our first panel discussion, which will begin at 4:10. We will alert you when it's time to return to your seats. Thank you very much. Please make your way to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the pleasure to have our first panel discussion. Before this begins, Please note again of your headsets at your seats. Channel 1 is English and Channel 2 is Japanese. Moderating this discussion will be Steve Sonka, Executive Director of the Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuels Initiative. As Executive Director of CAFE, Mr. Sonka works to further its mission of fostering industry partnership for the development and commercialization of sustainable aviation fuels. With over 34 years of industry experience, he continues to serve in leadership, steering committee, consultancy, and BOD roles with multiple aviation industry organizations in areas of applying technology and business concepts to enable commercial progression with SAF. I will now turn the time over to him to introduce each panelist and begin this section of the program.
Thank you, Emiko. We good? Yep, okay. So, yep, I'm Steve, and 4 years of my life are missing from that description. So 38 years in the industry now with OEMs, airlines, and the last 13 years with CAFE. And CAFE is a public-private partnership focused solely on the development of SAF as the primary means for decarbonizing aviation. And we've got a real simple remit, which is to simply foster the development and commercialization of SAF, and I have the great luxury of being able to work with some great teammates like you see on the stage today in order to make that happen. So with me today, we have Ms. Cherie Wilson, Vice President of Government Affairs.
No one sees the world quite like an airline.
And that's true. Thank you. Was that from above or? Government Affairs and Sustainability at Delta Airlines. Mr. Tom Michaels, Director of Government Affairs at United Airlines. Mr. Tadashi Matsushita, Executive Vice President of ANA Group Corporate Strategy, Airline Management, and Okinawa Region of ANA Holdings. And Mr. Makoto Maezawa, how was that? Decent? Senior Vice President of the Americas at Japan Airlines. So we have two sessions today that are going to explore different facets of the work that's being done by the industry. This specific session is focused on airline approaches, airline views, airline activities. And what they're going to discuss in order with some brief presentations followed by Q&A is what roles and responsibilities should airlines have to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050? How should airlines collaborate with stakeholders to achieve carbon neutrality? Beyond alliances, how should airlines cooperate with rivals or be in co-opetition with everybody in the industry? How should airlines think about absorbing the price of SAF, which may remain high, versus the price of petroleum jet for some period of time? And they're going to discuss what their expectations are and the challenges they perceive for SAF procurement and production expansion. So just a general view of multiple aspects from the airline industry. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick off with Cherie.
Thank you, first of all, on behalf of Delta Airlines, GD, for including us in this symposium. Sustainably connecting the U.S. and Japan has been and remains a priority for Delta. We provide the most service of any other U.S. carrier from the U.S. to Haneda to 6 destinations: Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, Seattle, Los Angeles, and Honolulu. So we very much appreciate being a part of this important dialogue. Today, I'd just like to share a few slides with you regarding our journey to net zero, and as part of the larger aviation industry's commitment to address climate change. So as I go through the deck, I hope you'll see these reoccurring top-line messages incorporated throughout the presentation. We genuinely wish to reinforce our commitment to work collaboratively with public and private sector partners in the U.S. and abroad to advance policies and coalitions that will scale the global SAF marketplace. And with that, one of the ways in which we are educating the public is through ensuring that there's transparency in our path to net zero And I apologize, I can't seem to go back. There we go. So what we'd like to do is play a brief video for you that just demonstrates the ways in which we are publicly trying to relay our journey to net zero. Let's see if this works. No. Sorry. If you could play the video on the back, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So I hope that the video provided a level set on how we fit into the global decarbonization and sustainability journey. We find the objective of bringing our customers, our passengers, and our workforce along. And messages like this make it transparent and relatable. So as we think about the aviation sector's contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions, we've heard a lot of the estimates. There's an expectation, of course, that our share will grow as the auto industry increasingly electrifies and travel demand, of course, rebounds from pre-pandemic levels, or to pre-pandemic levels. We are a hard to decarbonize sector, and we have few alternatives to conventional jet fuel. 89% of our carbon footprint comes from the use of conventional jet fuel, and so therefore that is the core crux of our strategy. This slide represents the range of measures available to us as we think about the opportunities for intermediate and midterm impact, and in particular in relation to the role of ICAO as we think about the role of CORSIA, which we heard about earlier, as well as the long-term global aspiration for net zero. I don't think this thing likes me. It's okay, no worries. Now, as we think about our flight to net zero, one of the elements that I want to highlight is that we've developed essentially two core pillars to demonstrate our commitment to addressing net zero. One, eliminating our climate impact from flying. This is where we believe that we'll have the most ability to affect change, which is changing how we fly, what we fly, and advancing the use of alternative fuels. And then we're also looking at embedding sustainability in everything that we do. And so in this capacity, this is where we're thinking about how are we transforming the travel experience. So whether that's eliminating single-use plastics, redirecting waste away from traditional landfill, or electrifying our ground support equipment. This is a way in which we are really seeking to engage our customers and improve the overall experience. But notably, what we've done along the journey is that we've developed interim goals that we think will be critical to getting there. And so in particular, when we think about our flight to net zero and SAF representing our most important lever, we've outlined a path forward that ultimately will enable us to transition away from conventional jet fuel and towards the use of sustainable aviation fuel. So in this particular regard, one of the ways in which we're doing this is by developing various coalitions, committing to the use of long-term offtake agreements. So we have offtake agreements in place with traditional energy companies as well as new entrants. And we've also partnered with corporate and cargo customers to help reduce the overall cost of SAF by co-investing in SAF. The challenge here is that there's, quite frankly, as we've heard, very little available supply, and the costs are unfortunately disproportionately high relative to conventional jet fuel. And so as a result, we are very much dependent on robust partnerships and support via the US government. I want to applaud the US government for their leadership in advancing the SAF Grand Challenge, which you all heard about today. And in particular, this whole of government approach, quite frankly, gives the public sector and the business sector the ability to collaborate towards target setting and implementing policies that will enable us to affordably purchase and scale SAF. And so with that, I just wanted to flag the approach that the US has taken with the Federal Reduction Act, and in particular, the establishment of the Blender's Tax Credit and the Clean Fuels Production Credit. From our government affairs vantage point, it has been critically important for us to advocate in support of policies and partnership with our supply chain partners. And so we were pleased to see an important first step advanced by the US government in the form of these incentives, as well as a robust grant program, which you heard about, that is currently being executed at the Department of Transportation. And of course, there are funds and resources that have been made available through the Department of Energy that will help alleviate the cost burden as we look to scale this industry. Additionally, we are seeing investment from states. In particular, they are building off the momentum of the Inflation Reduction Act. And here in the US, I want to thank my colleague, Tom from United, for his work in Illinois. And our hub states, as you'll see here, Minnesota, Michigan, and Washington, are three other states that have advanced or are in the process of advancing legislation, either tax credits or low carbon fuel standards, that will truly be integral to adding additional incentive support that can be layered on top of the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's critically important because we are trying to address price parity here in the US between the traditional on-road fuels market and frankly, this nascent sustainable aviation fuel market that represents less than 1% of what we have available. So we need to see robust momentum from states. And this is just a brief example of how we are catalyzing partnerships. We launched a first of its kind initiative in Minnesota, which is our second largest hub recently, whereby we are setting individual goals for uptake based on the fact that we have significant demand at MSP, and in particular, the policies that I just went through. You see Minnesota as one of the first movers in advancing policies that would support the scale up of SAF. It also represents an important state in terms of having immediate access to agricultural feedstocks. And we believe that if you can catalyze and invest in SAF with the value chain, you are essentially creating an opportunity to bring that scale, the cost curve, down. So ultimately, I want to leave you all with the message that we have an industry-wide commitment to SAF. We believe that you must have performance-based as well as feedstock and technology-neutral incentives that will help drive investment from the private sector into SAF. And these need to be in place for the duration of the capital investment that's necessary to see these facilities get off the ground. And state-level incentives that complement the federal incentives do also need to be adopted to ensure robust diversification across the country. And our last message is that mandates without incentives certainly can leave some challenges, will require certain challenges in terms of not guaranteeing sufficient supply for affordable, cost-competitive SAF, which is particularly of importance to us. And we hope that the approach that the United States has taken can serve as a model for other countries to follow. So, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Shuri. And we'll just move right along to Tom.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Shuri. Great presentation. Let's see if I can make this work any better than you can. Good. While we wait for that, my name is Tom Michaels, and I'm the Government Affairs Director with United Airlines, where I manage all policy and advocacy related to our sustainability initiatives. And to start off today, I would like to deliver three basic top-line messages. First, the decarbonization of the aviation sector is a critical element of our collective emission reduction goals and a top priority for United and for the commercial aviation sector as a whole. Second, the most pressing obstacle to aviation decarbonization is the scaling and commercialization of low-carbon, sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF. We have to press ahead on other decarbonization initiatives that range from operational efficiencies to innovative aircraft engines and designs to capture our carbon emissions directly from the air. But fuel is a critical component here. Third and finally, United and the other commercial airlines around the globe are working together with our fuel suppliers, our aircraft manufacturers, with emerging technology companies, and with policymakers to ensure that affordable, sustainable, low-carbon aviation becomes the new standard in flight in the years to come. And before I commence my official presentation, I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues here from ANA, Japan Airlines, and Delta for their collective efforts. ANA's SAF Flight Initiative, JL's critical investments in companies like Fulcrum Bioenergy, and Delta's active advocacy for SAF supportive policies, and such as their Minnesota hub, are all critical efforts toward our shared decarbonization objectives. And we look forward to continuing that successful collaboration, and of course with the policymakers that are here in this room, Annie Petsonk, foremost among them, a true leader in this space. So it's a real honor to be here as part of this symposium, because I think it does show our shared commitment. Let's see. I think I've somehow gone too far. There we are. So, for air travel, to redefine air travel with environmental responsibility and sustainability at the forefront, we have to start by acknowledging the challenge we face, and that's that aviation currently contributes around 3% of our global greenhouse gas emissions, and without action, that is expected to rise significantly as other industries decarbonize. At the end of 2020, we pledged a net zero goal of becoming 100% green by eliminating our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, without relying on the use of traditional carbon offsets. We believe that while this is a very hard thing to do, it's also the right thing to do. It affords us the opportunity to focus on taking tangible steps to mitigate climate change impacts from our operations and create the future that we expect to deserve. United's decarbonization strategy has basically 4 pillars. We have to reduce our fossil fuel consumption by improving our operational efficiency and by replacing our fossil-based fuels with sustainable aviation fuels. We have to innovate by investing directly into early-stage technologies that hold the potential to radically transform aviation. And we have to remove our carbon footprint where possible through technologies like direct air capture. And finally, what has brought us all here today, we have to collaborate. We're collaborating with policymakers, with our fellow airlines and our corporate customers. For example, the SAF Tax Credit Coalition, led by key SAF producers in United and other airlines, successfully advocated for the enactment of the first ever tax credit explicitly for sustainable aviation fuel. Another key collaborative initiative that we launched to finance our transition to SAF is the Eco Skies Alliance. At its core, the Eco Skies Alliance is a collaborative financing mechanism for clean fuels. We established a cross-sector coalition comprised of our global corporate customers who are financing the green premium associated with the low-carbon sustainable aviation fuel used on their flights in exchange for the rights to the environmental attributes of that low-carbon fuel. Today, roughly 50 companies are involved in the Eco Skies Alliance, and they range from Microsoft to Siemens and from Accenture to Nike. Oops. So it really is all about the fuel, unfortunately. The combustion of jet fuel in our aircraft accounts for roughly 98% of United's greenhouse gas emissions. We're not particularly different than most airlines in that respect. United is a very large company. We have almost 100,000 employees. We have facilities all over the world, and we operate a significant ground fleet. And yet, of our total corporate emissions, 98% is the combustion of jet fuel. To address our emissions from jet fuel usage, we're taking steps to use less fuel by steadily enhancing the efficiency of our operations. We're securing newer and more efficient aircraft. We're advancing the deployment of advanced aerospace technologies that are forecasted to the market between now and 2050. So think different engines, lighter materials, direct air capture, batteries, and more. And of course, we are reducing the carbon intensity of the fuel we use by replacing conventional jet fuel with sustainable aviation fuel. United has a long history of leading on sustainability. In 2009, we flew the first demonstration flight using SAF by a U.S. airline. In 2016, United became the first airline globally to use SAF in regular operations. And we're the first airline to have launched a flight using 100% sustainable aviation fuel. But while efforts like the Eco Skies Alliance help us finance our SAF offtake, we needed to go a little bit further to support startups that are focused on the reduction of carbon emissions in aviation through sustainable aviation fuel research, technology deployment, and production. And to that end, United launched its Sustainable Flight Fund in February this year with more than $100 million of capital from United and its inaugural corporate partners like JP Morgan Chase, GE, Honeywell, and others. By July, just 5 months after its launch, United announced that our Sustainable Flight Fund had increased its investment power to nearly $200 million and added 8 new corporate partners 5 months after its initial launch. And this slide shows you some of the portfolio companies that we are investing in through the Sustainable Flight Fund and our United Airlines Ventures Fund. So companies like Alder and Fulcrum and Blue Blade Energy, which is actually a JV that we're involved with, are in the sustainable aviation fuel space. But there are other companies such as Archer and Hart Aerospace and ZeroAvia that are experimenting with different kinds of drivetrains. So whether it's an electric aircraft or a hydrogen-powered aircraft. And then we're going deeper into the supply chain with Natron Energy. That's a revolutionary battery company that we're investing in. And then we're looking around the corner at third-generation SAF opportunities that would use captured gases, power-to-liquids opportunities such as dimensional energy and others that you see here. So, with that, I think I've mostly covered everything. If I could leave a message today with you, it's that collaboration across industry and across governments is critical to meeting our decarbonization goals. Here in Washington, my personal focus is on public policy that provides incentives that will help scale and commercialize low-carbon solutions. In the U.S., in just the past year, we've seen a variety of key policy changes, most of which Cherie highlighted. In other countries, we're seeing great initiatives like the Green Lane Initiative highlighted by JCAB. I think the hybrid approach, using mandatory approaches as well as incentives that Japan is outlining, is a great model, quite frankly. I think we're going to need a little bit of both. We do support incentives, but we are also certainly open to well-crafted mandates in the future as production begins to ramp up. At the end of the day, we're trying to build a new clean fuel industry, and that will take significant private capital as well as public sector investments like these. We look forward to continuing our strong collaboration with allied groups toward this common objective. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, to Tadashi.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me in this panel and giving opportunity for ANA to share some of the things we've been doing and address the things we're thinking about these important topics. So ANA has made a climate commitment a central aspect of our business philosophy. And we have set a midterm goal of reducing CO2 emissions by 10% compared to 2019 by 2030. And by 2030, we will be replacing 10% of our jet fuel with sustainable aviation fuel. We are moving towards our ambitious goals through 4 key approaches as shown on the slide. Fleet modernization and operational improvements, use of sustainable aviation fuel, utilization of carbon offsetting mechanism, and investment in carbon removal technologies. So working together with our partners in the United States, we have already begun building some successes as a pioneer in decarbonizing the aviation industry. At ANA, the introduction of fuel-efficient aircraft has been significant and long-term strategic consideration. We were fortunate enough to have a wonderful strategic partner with Boeing. As first airline to introduce Boeing 787. From a fuel perspective, in 2019, ANA announced its strategic partnership with LanzaJet. As we know, LanzaJet is at the vanguard of next generation SAF production using ethanol-based feedstock. So LanzaJet has provided ANA with invaluable expertise especially during the early stages of navigating emerging SAF market. SAF is absolutely the key to decarbonize the aviation industry. However, SAF itself is not enough to achieve our net zero goal. We need to have other solution, and that's why we, as an airline, I think we are the first one to have a strategic partnership with company 1.5. We've signed the purchasing contract with them, and 1.5 is now constructing the direct air capture plant in Texas, and which is expected to be commercially operational by mid-2025. And upon completion, we will be purchasing 10,000 metric tons of CDR credits per year for 3 years starting from 2025. So ANA is well established as a leading voice for SAF adoption in Japan. So this left image is of the first scheduled flight powered by SAF to depart from our major hub airport, Haneda. So thanks to this successful introduction of SAF at our major hub airport, we were able to launch the program called SAF Flight Initiative, responding to the corporate demand for decarbonized logistics and travel. So the SAF Flight Initiative is essentially the mechanism to distribute the portion of cost of SAF across the value chain. It was the first program of its kind in Asia. We learned from our partner, United Airlines. Currently, 14 Japanese companies signed up for this program. In order to create momentum for decarbonization in the aviation industry and send a strong signal for SAF demand, in addition to what ANA has been doing, we've been collaborating with other airlines, even those regarded traditionally as our rivals. So sustainability efforts has significantly changed the dynamics of how we work together. So in October 2021, ANA and Japan Airlines issued a joint report with the aim of increasing awareness and promoting understanding of sustainable aviation fuel. And the right-hand side, 16 corporations in March 2022. This includes not only airline and SAF manufacturer, but also feedstock suppliers, the financial institutions, and so forth, got together and jointly launched the voluntary organization called Act for Sky. And this Act for Sky works on commercialization and expansion, promotion of domestically produced SAF. So now there are 30 companies which has signed up for this organization. So this cross-industry collaboration has been and will continue to be instrumental in promoting sustainability in the aviation industry. The feedstock availability. This is one area that poses significant challenge to ensuring stable production increases in SAF. ANA is proactively engaging collaboration with the government on SAF manufacturing project, including establishing so-called e-fuel manufacturing technologies. As just one example, in August 2021, consortium of 5 corporations, including ANA, made a proposal of investigating the development of man-made photosynthesis technology, and this proposal was adopted as a commissioned project by the Ministry of Environment in Japan. Back. So, to wrap up, the key takeaways. Commitment to playing a leading role in raising awareness for aviation decarbonization. Although airlines cannot make SAF themselves, they can and they must be a leader in partnering with producers and demonstrating the benefit it brings to the society and their commitment to the sustainable future. And cooperation instead of competition to elevate an industry to the next level of societal good. Cooperation is often more important than competition. So this collaborative effort between ANA and Japan Airlines sent a powerful message about industry's commitment to sustainable aviation in Japan. Sustainability in aviation is a collective issue for stakeholders. Airlines will play a leading role, but it is important for all parties involved, including fuel suppliers, airports, governments, customers as well, to recognize and address the challenges related to sustainability. Only through collective understanding actions we can achieve a truly sustainable industry. And last but not least, comprehensive government support. While we aim to fulfill our commitments towards decarbonization, we're concerned about the myriad policies and priorities among different nations and regions. It is our expectation that governments will reach consensus in critical areas and collaborate to promote comprehensive support for decarbonization, ensuring a level playing field for all airlines. Thank you.
Thank you, Tadashi. And over to you, Makoto.
Yes, thank you. My name is Makoto Maezawa. I'm a Senior Vice President in America, the Japan Airlines. I'm very happy to join this event, but honestly, I'm a little bit nervous because of this is the first time to have this kind of panel, but do my best. Okay, first, let me explain JAL's GX strategy to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. As many of you are aware, the last October, the target values set by ICAO for the CO2 reduction promotion system, CORSIA, were revised. With a change in the baseline, it is necessary to further deepen the product reduction target. In addition, government initiatives are also accelerating. We will make effort to renew fuel-efficient aircraft, devise new operations, utilize and promote domestic production of SAFs, and also utilize offset through emission trading. Okay, next slide. This page provides a timeline of domestic and international decarbonization-related initiatives and procurement contract from 2018 to 2022. The JAL Group has set a goal of replacing 1% of all fuel on board with SAF in fiscal year 2025 and 10% in fiscal year 2030. In order to achieve our goal, we have been procuring SAF both domestically and internationally. And in Japan, we are collaborating with stakeholders across various industries to manufacture and commercialize domestically produced SAF. Overseas, we have been proceeding with SAF procurement strategically, focusing on leading companies on the west coast of United States and Neste in Europe, as well as collaborating with Japanese trading companies. In June of this year, we expect to achieve the 1% target for 2025 through the contract with Shell. Today, I would like to explain about the joint procurement by One World and building momentum in Japan, framed in red on the slide. This page explains joint procurement. We are currently working with One World Alliance members to procure SAF in the US, which is our leaders in SAF production. We have signed contract with Ametis, which used waste cooking oil and animal fat as raw materials, and Jibo, which used non-food corn as a raw material to procure sustainable aviation fuel from each. Japan Airlines will start fueling with SAF in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego from 2024 to 2026. This is the first joint procurement in our alliance, and by demonstrating the necessity of SAF to multiple airlines, we will contribute to the spread and market expansion of SAF and promote carbon neutrality in aviation. So next slide, I will skip the detailed explanation here as it overlapped with Matsushita-san's presentation. Thank you very much. In order to secure a stable supply of SAF in Japan, we are conducting survey and awareness activities in cooperation with ANA and JAL, as well as with many other industries. the Japan Airlines launched the Sustainable Challenge flight for a week last month on scheduled flight from Haneda to New York under the slogan, "A Sustainable Future Together." The significance of the September timing of conducting this event was to provide a sustainable transportation option for these who are traveling on New York route during the UN SDG Summit. We also want to use this opportunity to raise awareness of achieving the SDGs in the airline industry. This flight used SAF for approximately 11% of all onboard fuel. We took measures to reduce CO2 emission by selecting the optimum operating altitude and using the electronic towing tractor. Also, carbon credits were also used to offset CO2 emissions. Finally, I would like to explain transition bond. By using the first SDGs bond, we wanted to clearly demonstrate our determination to tackle the best source of CO2 emission in the aviation industry, which is emissions from aircraft, and work toward reducing them. Increasing SAF production, which I have already explained, will take some time, and technology to use non-fossil fuel, such as electricity and hydrogen to power airplanes is still under development. During the transition period, until these new technology become available, early aircraft renewal of fuel-efficient aircraft should be considered a top priority. Therefore, Japan Airlines has chosen to use the proceeds of SDGs bond issue for fuel-efficient aircraft renewal. Aircraft renewal will improve fuel consumption per aircraft by approximately 20%. By fiscal year 2025, 47% of our fleet will comprise of our new aircraft. Okay, thank you very much. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we clearly have some common themes, and I've been asked to wrap those up at the end of this session. But I'll ask a couple of questions to dig in a little bit more on a few areas. So I think, in addition to the four of you, right, you got a lot of airlines around the world who are really digging in here. And I think the lack of demand is not an issue at present, right? It's lack of production capacity, and that's impeded by several things. Can any of you point to some specifics for maybe other things that the airlines can do to work together? Is it something we do through IATA? Is it something that happens that's fostered through ICAO efforts? But just general thoughts, and it could be market-based mechanisms too, where IATA could come in. But any thoughts on things that would change the game with respect to further collaboration within the airlines? Anybody?
Well, I'll jump in. I think the airlines are collaborating. I think what we've seen through ICAO, I was at the pre-CAF conference recently, and the level of engagement from the various trade associations and from the government stakeholders was evident that the airlines are leveraging strategic opportunities to elevate their commitment to procure SAF. I think where there are additional opportunities is, quite frankly, in ensuring that we are educating others about the need for robust policy investment that will ultimately enable increased production of SAF that can bring down the cost curve of SAF. And in order to do that, it's going to require airlines collaborating with a broad cross-section of players. We think it is critically important to look at the entire value chain. So from the feedstock, the producers, the farmers, all the way to the end users and the key players along that full value chain. So making sure that you have all of the players at the table, ultimately engaging constructively around a solution is critically important.
Okay. And I'll come back to that to expound on that a little bit, but Tom or anybody else?
So certainly, collaboration on advocacy is critical. We had a great success over the past 3 years with this very broad coalition that all of us were involved in. Our friends in the fuel production community, LanzaJet was a great leader in that. So I think on policy design, policy and advocacy, that's certainly something that we work in every day, and it's a great spot for collaboration. I think there's a lot of room for innovation when it comes to real financing opportunities. You know, airlines compete bitterly, right? We compete aggressively for markets and costs and things like that. But we don't compete on safety, we don't compete on sustainability. And so I think there are real opportunities. You know, in concentrated geographic areas where you have an airport, where all the airlines come in and they rely on a variety of fuel producers. I think there's great opportunity to explore innovative financing mechanisms where the airport lessees that operate there could collaborate on supporting lower carbon fuel alternatives. There's also the infrastructure that needs to go in to make that all possible. So we've only just started to scratch the opportunity there, and certainly bilaterally there's great opportunity on R&D and on deploying new policy solutions that may look different from one country to the next, and I think we all have a lot to learn from each other on how we can innovate there.
Yes, I've touched upon the voluntary organization, Act for Sky. That's private sector, got together and working together for the commercialization and promotion and expansion of SAF. And Onuma-san mentioned the council we have established in Japan. It's the government-led, but private sector is committed to that council. So there's a collaboration between amongst public, private, and cross-industry. But I think we need to have it's only in Japan. So if we could expand that to overseas, then I think it will work better. And also, I think I've touched upon the comprehensive government support part, the myriad policies and priorities among different nations, different regions. And that's actually confusing and very difficult for us, for private sectors, to set the agenda in the first place. So if we could discuss that through ICAO, IATA, and come up with a consensus, I think our initiative will move forward.
Okay. Go to anything?
Okay, can I speak Japanese?
Sure.
Thank you for that question, and also I appreciate those comments from my colleagues here. I definitely echo what has been said here on the stage. Currently, we are working together with ANA so that we have a very good alignment together. And also, we have Act for Japan, and also One World Alliance is another initiative that we have been taking advantage of. Of course, we have more opportunities to come and then also more partners to work with. And one thing that I can touch on is that I think that rulemaking is something that we need to work together on. We do have a long future together in terms of this effort, so we need to visualize what kind of rules are most optimal for our efforts. And so that is how we can shape a good future for us all. And then also, of course, we have to have very good awareness in terms of sustainability. And also, airlines always face customers, so we need to think about customers' benefits and then also social benefits at large. And that's how we can work together, that this kind of ideas can be immersed in the society. Thank you.
So it's going to come back to a comment that Shri made with respect to collaboration. There's all kinds of things that make that difficult, and one of those is the fact that we're producing SAF from a broad range of resources and from a broad range of technologies, and those resources certainly aren't uniform around the world. And so that makes it hard. We can continue to work on technology development to bring down the cost of those, but from a policy perspective, it is perhaps a little bit more difficult, or coming up with a uniform governmental approach for those things. But I think the things that you outlined, that all of you outlined with respect to that communication about the challenge, the interest in the airlines still wanting to buy these fuels with some level of policy support, et cetera, is key to overcoming that diversity that we see around the world. And in the U.S., a lot of things we see, we're blessed with feedstock availability, but we know in some other areas it's absolutely not the case. Any thoughts of anyone with respect to the diversity? Does that help us, hurt us? Anything else we can do about it? Tom?
Could I take first crack? I would say that the diversity of feedstocks and solutions and technologies is a feature. It's not a bug. It can be a challenge, but it shouldn't be a fundamental problem. I think what is a problem is if we see the current status of technology or the current status of given feedstocks carbon intensity, and we assume that that will continue on forever, when in fact this all evolves over time. And I think for that reason, it's critical that when we devise our policies, they are performance-based, right? We establish a goal that we want to achieve, then let us figure out how we get there, right? And let us do what we need to do to meet the performance criteria set forth in a given rule. So I would say any feedstock, for example, should be eligible. Any technology should be eligible as long as it can meet certain performance-based criteria.
Perfect. Anybody else want to comment on that? The challenges of disparity in feedstock and supply?
Japan definitely has a challenge on this, feedstock matter. So, that's why we need collaboration, cross-border collaboration. That's one of the reasons we need cross-border collaboration. And also, just as Tom mentioned, technology might help. And the Japanese companies, including us actually, I touched upon the consortium of 5 companies. We're trying to have the next technology that would allow us to, minimize the disadvantage of having less feedstock. So, for the time being, collaboration is absolutely necessary for Japan.
All right. There's been work going on for several years in reaching out to existing petroleum also. And we know that one of the potential advantages there is if we can use existing petroleum assets, it cuts down on the capital expense associated with building new facilities. Any of you have observations about collaborating with existing petroleum companies, and do you see them coming to the table the way you think that they need to?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think it's critically important that we engage with the existing petroleum companies. As you mentioned, they have the infrastructure, they have the capacity, so scale is frankly in their DNA. And quite frankly, they are all being pushed to develop their own climate and decarbonization goals. The trajectory on which they are doing that, of course, there's different goals for each of these companies. Some are more forward-leaning than others, but I think they are consistently feeling the pressure to engage and diversifying their portfolio of offerings to include sustainable aviation fuel, to include power to liquids or synthetic fuels, as well as renewables, hydrogen, things of that nature, carbon capture, direct air capture. These are all elements that we are seeing existing companies invest in. However, it's also critically important to have new entrants into the marketplace because we're fostering competition. There is significantly enough demand for all of these players to row in the same direction. So we welcome opportunities to work with those that are just getting started and those that are already well established.
Exactly. Heads nodding. Anything else?
Okay.
Go ahead.
いや、先ほどお話
Also, this is something to do with the previous comment. So we are doing Act for Sky in Japan. And since the launch of this Act for Sky, we have done so many activities. And also, we still have so many steps to take in the future. So, for example, we need to think about feedstock and also technology. And so those are still our focuses to work on in the future. And so I think that we will be continuing on with this effort so that we can lead the world from the Japanese market. So thank you.
So I'm going to reserve 2 minutes.
では、
Wrap. Real quick, one two-word answers. What do you think is the most difficult thing for Japanese and U.S. aviation industries as well as the global aviation industry to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050? And I'm assuming your answers are going to bolster what I'm going to say in terms of a wrap-up.
I would say cost competitiveness.
Cost.
You can't repeat, Tom. Come on.
All right, I'll go for technology viability. I think there are going to be a lot of challenges scaling this.
I would say cost as well, but supply, supply of stuff, and which should be affordable for airlines, and ultimately it's going to be passed on to customers. So the supply with affordable price.
Yes, definitely cost. That is the most important thing. However, I can mention that domestic supply chain in Japan, so that's something that we need to work on. And then so that is going to be all Japan efforts and then also collaboration with the rest of the world. But of course, cost is definitely the biggest definite element.
1分7秒しか残ってないんですけれども、まとめてみます。
Because I'm living in this space, the airlines are committed. There's no question. They're trying to figure out exactly how they do that without and stay in business. They're committed to aviation sustainability. There are multiple pillars that they're using to pursue that aviation sustainability. They are all in on SAF. Everybody recognizes that SAF is going to play a major component of being able to achieve carbon neutrality in whatever form that it's pursued in. And we didn't talk about this. It was summarized in some of the slides, but the airlines are also all in on innovating with respect to different business models and working with partners in unique ways that they haven't necessarily done before. Another key message, this all requires a lot of collaboration. Bringing all the partners to the table to figure out how to overcome obstacles is key. Support from governments, passengers, customers is warranted and welcomed. Incentives and mandates have a place to play. There's a lot of uncertainty right now around those. Different folks are trying different things. We don't know if it's going to be consolidated in sufficient time. And it's highlighted by the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty is the key death knell for being able to move forward aggressively with standing up in a completely new industrial sector. So we've got our work cut out for us as an aviation industry. We're all working it hard, and hopefully the future means good things for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sonka, and all of our panelists. We will now have another 10-minute coffee break. We will let you know when you will return to your seats where you can join us for our second panel. Thank you again. We're ready to begin, so please make your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the pleasure to have another panel discussion. We do have to note one change to the program. Ms. Gomez had to leave early due to a schedule conflict, so we apologize that she is not on this panel. But we are very excited for the members who are currently here, and we know we'll have a very lively and productive discussion. For this panel, we are pleased to again have Mr. Sonka be moderator and to lead the discussion. So I will turn the time over to him.
Okay, welcome back. So as I indicated earlier, I don't know if I ever completed that thought, but we got two sessions. The first one we heard from the airlines about things that they're doing, things that they're concerned about, different approaches that they're taking. And, you know, we pretty much set the stage for the challenges that are out there. And so in this panel, we've got a little bit different perspective from the perspectives of a producer, a technology provider, and a financier, as it were, as well as feedback from the government representatives that were in the keynote addresses. And really, this session is all around expanding and securing sustainable aviation fuel from a supply perspective. So I'm joined by an old and dear friend, Jimmy Samartzis, Chief Executive Officer and Board Director for LanzaJet. We've been working together for too many years, or maybe not enough years to actually get more things done, right? Mr. Saburo Takeuchi, General Manager, Policy Research and Government Relations, Next Generation Energy Business Group at Mitsubishi Corporation, and Ben Reja, Global Practice Manager, Transport Practice, Infrastructure, Vice Presidency at World Bank. And you already introduced the other three on the end. I'll come back to them after these first three presentations to get some feedback from them on what they've heard, and then we'll go into a dialogue period. So Jimmy, you want to go ahead and get us kicked off with your presentation? And do you have a clicker?
I do not. Do we have a clicker? Well, I'm getting that. It's wonderful to be here. As Steve mentioned, he and I have worked together for many years. I've been working at building this sustainable aviation fuels industry for 15 years. Started back in 2008. So it's a privilege to be here. Japan for us has a very special place. We have Japanese investors in our company. We have Japanese airlines who work with us. We have Japanese government that we partner with. So I'm glad to be able to be here today and to share a bit of our story with you. I wanted to start with what the market is that we're shaping by 2030. So the expectation is that we have a $20 billion market by 2030. Just to give you a sense, that today is a $400 million market. So quite a bit of expansion and growth is anticipated as we think about the next 7 years, 6 years really, in terms of growth. You've heard some of these themes before. The market for SAF is growing. We have developing countries around the world who are still building their aviation infrastructures, and capacity is poised to grow through 2050. So we have to give those countries an opportunity to foster that growth within their own economies and within their own countries. Governments are stepping in and supporting the development of this industry. We're seeing more and more of that happening across the globe. And then SAF is a drop-in fuel. That means you're not changing out aircraft frames, aircraft engines, infrastructure, storage systems. None of that is changing. It's a drop-in fuel. What that also means is it's extremely difficult to actually develop new technology that can do what the fossil industry has been doing for 80 plus years. You've also heard this before as well today many times in terms of all the levers that aviation can pull on in order to decarbonize. The number you haven't heard, though, is that SAF is 65% of the solution to get to net zero by 2050. I would say probably at least 65% of the solution. So SAF is dependent on by the airlines, as you heard earlier, and the industry as a whole in order to decarbonize and meet that net zero ambition by 2050. I think it's helpful to take a step back. When you think about where we are today, there's a significant gap to where we're headed. Here in the United States alone, you heard the number, 21 billion gallons of fossil jet fuel is used a year. That's just commercial aviation. That is not general aviation, that's not military. That number is bigger when you start to factor those other parts of the sector in. We only had 16 million gallons of SAF that were used in the US last year. So assume 10% of 21 billion by 2030. That is a big gap that we need to fill between now and then. On a global basis, not that different of a story. Nearly 100 billion gallons of fossil-based jet fuel is consumed a year, again, only in commercial aviation. So what that means is, though, we do have new goals being set, mandates coming in place, incentives falling into place, and the most important one from our perspective is scale and technology and production. At the end of the day, you need to take a step back and understand and appreciate that we are building and catalyzing a completely new industry across a globe, which is hard to do, but we'll talk about what it takes. You've heard components of this. We haven't heard enough about innovation and funding, which is important, but I think you need innovation across all 5 of these dimensions. Technology is the one we easily talk about because that's what's foundationally required in order to produce the molecules. Policy, we've talked about quite a bit today, right? We've seen innovation in policy and changes in policy, which is happening. More of that is needed and more consistency across a global landscape. You heard from airlines in terms of what airlines are doing to show demand. Innovation and funding, though, is extremely important. This is not cheap to do, right? It costs billions and billions and billions of dollars to build new infrastructure. That's why things like the Inflation Reduction Act here, which has tax credits for the production of SAF, actually also has other measures that help in the development of infrastructure. When you think about what the government of Japan is doing, whether it's METI or NIDO within Japan, they're providing capital to help build out the infrastructure. When you're talking about billions of dollars that need to be deployed, having government support on the front end to deploy the technology is extremely important. I'll give you some examples for us here in a little bit of how innovation and funding has played a critical role. And then customers. You think about the customer, the traveler, as being the customer. The customer is also the corporate travelers. You heard a little bit from United and Delta and ANA in terms of how they work with their corporate customers. That's an important segment. Just the other day, another SAF producer, World Energy, announced a major deal with Microsoft, where Microsoft is buying the environmental attributes from the SAF that is being produced, which gives Microsoft what they want, and it gives an airline cheaper SAF that they can then access. So innovation in terms of how customers step in and step up is also important. But it takes this ecosystem on the whole in order for this to work. It's not any one thing that's going to make this actually work. We've heard a lot about policy. This is just an example of policies across a global landscape. Lots of words on this page. You know, Japan is considering a 10% mandate by 2030. You had progress in the EU a couple weeks ago with their legislation finally being concluded and finalized. Very different systems across the global landscape. Some supporting capital for infrastructure, others supporting mandates, others, as you heard about, supporting performance-based incentives like here in the United States. Our strong view is that governments should not be picking winners and losers. Governments should be supporting the development of a market. Let the market develop, and the technologies that work will actually get there, right? So that's the thing that we need to continue to focus on. I will share with you that from our perspective, we've got projects, we have 11 publicly announced projects throughout the world. In every single circumstance, the government has stepped in to be a partner with us on supporting those projects. A little bit about LanzaJet. LanzaJet has been a leader in this industry for many years. We use ethanol as the feedstock and thermocatalytically convert that into SAF. It's a novel technology that is extremely important in terms of decarbonizing aviation. We've been the first to the market to develop this technology. It actually started with the US Department of Energy. Our technology started actually in the Pacific Northwest National Lab in a lab environment. We scaled it up to pilot scale, demo scale, and now to commercial deployment. The US Department of Energy has been alongside us on that entire journey, from the lab environment all the way now to commercial deployment. We were able to get certified by ASTM in 2018. What that means is you can use our SAF as a drop-in fuel on commercial airplanes that have the flying public on them. We have a great group of investors and supporters, which I'll talk about, and we're building the world's first ethanol alcohol-to-jet plant right here in Georgia. These are some of our funders. So above the line are folks that actually own our company. They are our investors. Mitsui from Japan is one of our strongest supporters and involved with us in many ways. Suncor is Canada's largest oil company. Everyone here probably knows Shell. British Airways out of the UK, and then LanzaTech, which is the company that founded us. All those folks don't only support us with capital, they actually support us with other things. Shell is helping us scale up our technology to refinery, if you will, scale. Suncor has seconded folks to us for the commissioning and startup of our plant in Georgia. Mitsui helps us with commodity trading of ethanol. British Airways, obviously, with offtake. You'll see even in this example where you have to build the ecosystem in order to actually progress and develop actual production. Below the line, you have other folks that have supported us. This is where it becomes interesting. Microsoft stepped in with their Climate Innovation Fund and gave us a $50 million loan for our plant in Georgia at terms that we as a young company can't afford, or that otherwise cannot afford, right? It's really attractive terms. Breakthrough Energy is the fund that Bill Gates has established to help accelerate technologies. They gave us a $50 million grant. If you were to think about financing $50 million for our small plant, it translates to 80 cents additional per gallon of cost to the airlines. Al Nippon Airways showed up with a prepay for the fuel that we have with them, and the Department of Energy as well with a grant. The really neat thing about ethanol, and I can't stress this enough today, is that ethanol is not just what we conventionally know of ethanol as being corn ethanol and sugarcane ethanol. It is that, but it's so much more. We can make ethanol from off-gases, from industrial processes. Think about a steel mill. I was just in Ghent, Belgium, at the ArcelorMittal plant, a steel mill. We take the carbon monoxide from the steel mill and produce ethanol using our partner LanzaTech's technology. This is their project. We've done municipal solid waste converted to ethanol. In the UK, we're taking woody waste, converting it to ethanol. So we've also done carbon dioxide, add hydrogen to it, convert to ethanol. So although we talk about this as being an alcohol-to-jet process, it actually covers off the feedstocks that you think about when you think about Fischer-Tropsch, when you think about partial liquids. We can convert many feedstocks into ethanol. I'm not going to drain this slide. The most important thing here to note is two things. One is ethanol today. We have 30 billion gallons of ethanol available globally. Between the US and Brazil, you have the majority of that production. Not sure why these slides are going. Can we go backwards? Yeah, there we go. So between Brazil and the US, the majority of ethanol, that goes into road transport. Road transport is electrifying. It frees up capacity to shift to another market for aviation. And then when you think about the other feedstocks that I mentioned, it's an unlimited potential. You don't have a feedstock issue when you think about getting to ethanol. The thing I didn't mention on the last slide is, our process gets you to 90% of the product as SAF. That is very unique, right? Because other processes through the cuts of oil give you what it gives you. When you take ethanol as a building block molecule, you build it exactly as you want it for the products that you want. So if you want SAF, you can produce up to 90% as SAF, 10% renewable diesel, and within a matter of a day, you can change that to more renewable diesel and less SAF if you choose. The picture here is our plant in Georgia. When I talk about commercializing our technology, this is our actual plant. It's nearly done being constructed. It will be operational in Q1 of 2024. Construction wraps up this year. It is about an hour and a half west of Savannah. When we think about the global landscape, I said we have 11 announced projects. We have a total of 60 different opportunities that we're pursuing across the globe. Those are all different feedstocks, different partners, from oil companies to project developers. The numbers on this page signify where we see the biggest pull in terms of number of engagements that we have. If you were to look at the slide from a capacity perspective, you would see the North American market having the largest capacity. In North America, because of our performance-based system, you're having folks wanting to build larger capacity units because they can access ethanol that is already available in larger quantities. But we have projects in India. We're working with India's largest oil company for the first SAF project. In Australia, working with Qantas and Airbus on Australia's first SAF project. In New Zealand, the same thing with Air New Zealand. In Japan, we have two projects, which hopefully I'll talk about here. Mitsui is our partner in Japan. We are also working with Cosmo Oil, which is Japan's third largest oil company, and Taya Oil, Japan's fourth, on projects there, and certainly working with ANA, one of our partners, as well as GEL. It's extremely important that we think about these things on an ecosystem basis, and that's what we do. Every geography that we show up in, we pull together the right parties to help develop these projects. And just to wrap it up here, the sentiment I want to leave you with, this is a study that was just published by the consulting firm LEK. You'll see the different pathways listed here. You have HEFA as the dark bar at the bottom. You don't see much growth in HEFA because of the constraint on feedstock over the years. Alcohol-to-jet is the dark green. Fischer-Tropsch is the light green, and then partial liquids is the blue. The message here is that with ethanol, actually, we can do the same things that you see with Fischer-Tropsch and partial liquids. So alcohol-to-jet should not be thought about as just a corn ethanol or sugarcane ethanol story. It actually is a versatile platform where we can get to ethanol using any number of feedstocks and satisfy much larger demand and opportunity. And with that, I'll leave you with our tagline, which is "Someday is now." Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. So this is one of the challenges that I face very often in the marketplace. All of us do, anyone who is involved in this sector, that people think that what exists now, that's it. That's what you got to work with, right? You've got to get to your 2050 goals with the technology that you have today, limited feedstocks that you have today, et cetera, and it's absolutely not the case. And I think, yes, that last bar chart represents one person's view of sort of today-focused kind of mentality. But the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is my insight into all the rest of the things that are still coming our way that allow us to use 24/7 available low-cost feedstocks, completely new sets of technologies that allow us to do hub and spoke systems with respect to really simplifying the supply chain, driving down carbon, et cetera. And so one of the companies working broadly in the technology space is up next. And so, Saburo, if you want to take it away.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, friends, and participants, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Saburo Takeuchi of Mitsubishi Corporation. I'd like to talk about SAF deployment broadly, not just about US or Japan, but on a global scale from a private sector supply and an investor vantage point. So let's get right into it. Very quickly, I won't go through all of this. Mitsubishi Corporation is a global investment and trading house. We operate globally. More importantly, for today's conversation, not only you'll see this highlighted in red, my division, Next Generation Energy, but we also have other divisions within our company who are in petroleum and chemicals, but also the agri-food industry. So we try to leverage their know-how in terms of supplying, for example, biofuels. Very quickly on our company-wide, not just SAF, but how we are trying to do energy transition within our company. On the left-hand side, similar to many, we have a 2050 net zero target, and we also have a 2030 halving target. So we currently have 23 million tons of CO2, trying to have that very, very quickly. On the right hand, more importantly, on the offensive lens, here are probably the four pillars that we are trying to address through. One is renewable energy that you see in the green, and we're diversifying away from thermal coal assets as we speak, but also doubling our renewable assets. Currently we have about 3.3 gigawatts, so we're doubling that to 6.6 as we speak. Also, to assist the global electrification journey, critical minerals, as you know, is a critical, as the name says, very important. So copper, lithium, nickel, we're actively working on. Natural gas, you'll see on the right side, slowly disappearing, but for now, natural gas or LNG continues to be one of Japanese baseload energy sources. So we're going to continue to supply that, but to address the net zero target, we're actively pursuing CCS and also carbon credits to manage these two targets. And also, which comes to SAF-related issues, my division, Next Generation Energy, so not just SAF, but hydrogen, ammonia, other hydrogen derivatives, and also for countries like us, a maritime transport of hydrogen. These are very all important, so a very busy division for us. This is a very busy slide, so I will not go through this, but very quickly, Jimmy mentioned ecosystem, and we similarly look at things from an ecosystem and also a supply chain perspective. So in some of the commodities that I just mentioned, so hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives, biofuel and so forth, we look at both the production, the maritime transport and storage, and also the utilization. Highlighted in red is the biofuel and e-fuel for SAF. You see in the middle there, but also more longer-term horizon plays, so venture capitals and so forth. So we're very much not just looking at the immediate, 2020s, 2030 targets, but also longer-term plays as well. Now, getting into SAF, we see a number of key enablers for SAF deployment, again, globally. One, for biofuels especially, we're trying to cross-pollinate expertise of different industries, i.e. agri-food. For example, in the US, we have Indiana Packers, which is a pork packaging business that we have in Indiana. We're actively working on grain and soy trading in Nebraska and Kansas and so forth. So leveraging those, for those who've been in Japan, the convenience store Lawson's in the blue, that's something that we work, that's owned by us and so forth. So leveraging those type of expertise and quite frankly, the sources of that. So that's one that we're doing. Different technologies would have different maturity levels, i.e. talked about different technologies. Some have very different maturity levels. So HEFA, it's here now. Alcohol to jet is now emerging. But e-fuel, this is something in the future. So that's one thing. So from us, we want to be looking at everything, but they also have very different time nodes. So that's a very interesting issue for us. Also, one thing that we tend to forget is that many of these new sources would have also byproducts. So you see in the right-hand side, you see SAF, but also they will produce typically 10 to 20% of renewable diesel or renewable naphtha and so forth. So we got to find ways to not have these products go to waste. Obviously, we talked about public policy today, so I think that'll be part of our other conversation, but both the mandate side, but also the incentive sides are very much needed there. So let's go to the next one. In terms of our specific activities in SAF, in Japan, as mentioned by Onuma-san, one, we're working with ENEOS, the largest Japanese refiner. So we're doing something in Japan right now in terms of doing a feasibility study of them in terms of converting one of their assets to a base there. Also, we're working both here in the US and also Europe in many of the other HEFA, alcohol to jet, and emerging e-fuel sectors. Also to the right, LanzaJet also mentioned Breakthrough Energy. Breakthrough Energy has a fund called Breakthrough Energy Catalyst, which we call BEC, together with some of the partners there. So we're the first Asian industrial to be part of that. So again, SAF is a key target for BEC, as we just mentioned. So very much lots of commonalities there. Probably maybe a segue to our conversation today. Here are some of the opportunities and challenges that we see for SAF commercialization. First of all, the bio-derived fuel sources of today, HEFA in alcohol to jet, very much mature, but as mentioned, especially for HEFA, this is critically challenged in terms of just supply. So that's one thing. So again, feedstock availability is a key challenge there. Not necessarily an issue for US, but if you look at HEFA globally, you are going to see need for traceability and transparency. So issues like child labor, for example, exists in other parts of the world, and which needs to be, quite frankly, stomped out. So we can't not play there, but those are issues there. E-fuel is a ideal pathway from just a pure low carbon footprint perspective, but this is not here yet. So this is going to take a bit of time. So that's one. So again, policy requirement, which is probably a good segue to policy and support. One thing that we do see is US and EU has mechanisms already in place. And as mentioned by Mr. Onuma, Japan is currently in design of locking in this 10% requirement. So that's coming. Other regions, maybe not so. So for us to play globally, we are seeing pockets of the globe where we don't have mechanisms in place. So certainly, if we want to play globally, that's something that we would like to see. And also, when I say regional differences here in the bottom, for example, US has everything. Upstream, midstream, downstream market. Japan does not have any indigenous energy, so we have to import our feedstock. We in the private sector, we can manage the midstream, and then we have the downstream. Other countries might just have the upstream. So I think these different countries probably require different types of incentive mechanisms. So that's a key issue for us, and that's my end of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Ben, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Let's be mindful of time. We've already consumed quite a bit. So.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this really impressive symposium. Well, this is supposed to be about US and China, but I think this whole SAF business does need to include emerging and developing economies. and in order to actually accelerate the transition to decarbonized aviation. And there is quite a lot for international cooperation that we have. Just to give a little bit of a quick context why we should care about transport decarbonization in the developing world or in the non-OECD countries, this graph is always I show this because most people think that non-OECD countries don't have anything to do with carbon emission because that's mostly an OECD problem. Well, when you actually see this graph, the last 20 years, the vast majority of carbon emissions from transport actually the growth came from developing economies. So if we're going to meet our Paris goals, not only do we need to decarbonize transport sector, but also we need to decarbonize it in developing and emerging economies. It's a similar story as well for the aviation sector. Now this graph is showing the vast majority of aviation emission is coming from high-income countries or upper-middle-income countries. Currently, low-income are very low, but as we all know, air transport is income elastic. So as these countries develop, their income increases, air travel is going to increase, and we want to see that. Actually, some people think there shouldn't be air travel, but I don't agree with that because, like Anne said, connectivity for small towns or for big countries is crucially important for development. So if we're going to continue on the development trajectory, air connectivity will increase, air travel will increase. The only thing is we have to do it sustainably. So there shouldn't be a kind of contradiction or a trade-off between whether to travel or to be sustainable. So I think this is where we need to then work very hard on that. You may have seen our report recently that we issued on the role of sustainable aviation fuel. We agree that SAF would play an important role. Our estimate is 58%, but it's kind of 65% close to what Jimmy said, so more or less we're very close there. Current SAF production plants are dominated by OECD countries, which is unfortunate because the non-OECD countries actually are currently using about 42% of the Jet A fuel, and their demand for Jet A fuel is increasing. So we want to see many countries also to be part of that. And then we also don't want to leave developing economies behind on this energy transition because they can play a big role either in the production of SAF or in providing feedstocks and in actually using SAF also for their own purposes. So bringing emerging economies to the value chain of SAF is going to be hugely important if all of us are going to meet the needs of SAF for aviation. There's just not going to be enough. Well, maybe not the US, but Japan and other countries, the European Union, are going to need feedstocks and SAF to be produced outside of their countries. So this is just to show you the feedstock availability by region. You see that the non-food feedstocks, the vast majority actually of feedstocks in developing economies, contrary to the perception, comes from non-food sources or it just doesn't displace any food. So we have quite a bit in Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. So then to get into the crux of the issue then, why don't we see SAF investment in developing countries? Well, first is I think unlike many of the advanced countries, there are lack of policy support for SAF. Okay, there is the Korea, the EU thing, but other than Brazil and Indonesia, which is actually exactly, I was testing myself whether I'm correct, but in Jimmy's slide, he has both countries from developing economies, and then of course China is there as well, but we don't see any supporting policy for the production of SAF. In many countries. Then there is a lack of access to funding and financing, which I'll talk a little bit more about that. And there's also the whole business of lack of bankable projects and weak demand in the developing economies, or I would say fragmented demand is maybe a better way of describing what we see there. So in terms of cost, just to give you a perspective, a $500 million investment for a SAF facility is equivalent to a major highway corridor connecting Abidjan and the capital city of Burkina Faso, or a major hydropower project. So as you can see, the trade-offs are really huge for a country in developing economy. So which then says then we have to be much more innovative in bringing investment to other countries. So this is where I think I was hoping to explain the different financial innovations that we can do. I'm not so sure you can see this, but the whole idea is we need a blended financing structure if we're going to uptake investment here. First and foremost is we need concessional finance or grants, for whether it's going to be from climate funds, from multi-development banks, or it could be also bilaterals. You know, many bilateral countries, US, Japan, they have an aid program. So we need to bring that in, and then we need to map that kind of source of fund into where we could use it appropriately. It could be for guarantee or for taking first loss guarantee in that investment. So that basically then we get kind of other types of capital. Could be a loan from the World Bank or from IFC, other financial sector. So those are also much cheaper loans, kind of what you got from Microsoft. And then we also then need to go from the private sector to get equity investment or the sovereign funds that are interested in having a long-term investment. And then other financial institutions, then we can, you know, this kind of private sector investment, we can wrap it with maybe some partial risk guarantee. We have like a MIGA type instrument. So in a way, so I think what we're trying to do is blend, aggregate this different financing and create an investment fund or investment facility, which then in turn provides long-term loans to the different beneficiaries, whether it's a feedstock manufacturer or it's a SAF facility or maybe even, you know, an off-taker could be. So with that, I think by blending this financing, we can de-risk the private sector's investment and channelize a lot of the concessional financing into the appropriate way, and we minimize the government's expenditure on this investment. So, and then it also helps us in aggregating the fragmented demand, because one of the things that this kind of investment facility could do is look into the different demands and kind of aggregate them through project and pipeline development in different countries. So if you think this facility, for example, is set up, I don't know, in South Africa, then you can think about the neighboring countries that would provide the feedstock can be aggregated and be brought. So that's a little bit what our thinking is in unlocking financing for SAF, and it does require quite a lot of international cooperation. We're ready to work with the private sector and bilateral donors and other people interested in this. We have a few projects that are ongoing now in Kenya, South Africa, Colombia, a little bit on India as well, starting a dialogue, and some other countries that are coming in the pipeline. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. You used the example of the $500 million plant, and it's worth pointing out that we also have people working on the technology side to get the scale and the total system integration in place, and we're actually looking at some projects that are busting north of $2 billion each now, right? But it's, you know, really almost necessary to continue to drive down that cost, get that efficiency, et cetera. So you're going to be able to hang with us, Jimmy? Yep. Okay, all right. So here's what we're going to do is you got 3 minutes each for the folks at the end, and let me remind folks we have Annie Petsonk, Assistant Secretary at the Department of Transportation, Toshiyuki Onuma, Director General, Deputy Director General at MLIT, and Jeff Marudian at PDAS at EERE within the Department of Energy. So you made some initial statements, great perspective setting with respect to what's going on in the industry. Heard from the airlines who are interested in trying to figure out how to get this fuel. Got folks working hard on actual production scenarios. Can you, and Annie, I've seen you taking a lot of notes, so I know this is what you're thinking. Can you sort of summarize with respect to, everything that you heard, and let's get back to the root of this symposium, which is what can be done to improve a Japanese-U.S. kind of significant push in this region? What kinds of synergies can we leverage from one another? Should we consider new programs, have a new framework associated with just this relationship, et cetera? But just comment on what you've heard today from your perspective.
Thanks. Very, very interesting, both in this panel and in the previous panel. I'll make 3 quick points. First, I was very interested to hear in the previous panel, everyone said cost is the big problem. But when you look at the fossil fuel supply, cost is a big issue there too. And I was very interested, Jimmy, especially to hear you refer to that. And so I do think it's important to stand these costs against each other and also to look at where they intersect, such as the cost for a refinery of not retrofitting, but adding the distillation columns or whatever it is that you are going to need to produce SAF in existing refineries. Second point is I heard some discussion about de-risking. And I frankly don't like the term de-risk. Sorry, don't take it personally. But there is risk. And government is not going to remove all of the risk in this field. What we can do is we can share risk. For example, several folks have talked about the production tax credit and the blender's tax credit. Those are 2 examples. There was discussion about mandates as another means of sharing risk, which is very interesting because when a government does a mandate, if it has a sufficiently long timeline, or when it does an incentive with a sufficiently long timeline, that helps reduce the risk. Also, on the R&D side, the Federal Aviation Administration's just announced a notice of funding opportunity for the Fast SAF and Fast Tech programs. That's $247 million. And also, FAA has a set of research partnerships with universities in the United States and universities in the developing world. And those are ways that government can help, I think, reduce, but not completely de-risk. A third point is, let's not forget also something that some of the previous panelists mentioned, which is what kind of SAF are we producing here? It makes a big difference if you have, let's say, 1 billion gallons of SAF that is 10% better than conventional jet fuel on a life cycle basis, or SAF that is 60% better. The Inflation Reduction Act offers those tax credits for SAF that is at least 50% better on a life cycle basis in terms of emissions than conventional fossil fuel. And there's an escalator in there for every percentage point that the SAF is better than 50%, it's an extra penny a gallon in terms of the tax credit. And I think to draw the line under it in terms of the U.S.-Japan relationship, I think sitting down together, as this conference is having us do, to look at our respective incentive packages and policy developments, and then putting those in the very practical frame like our Green Lanes project proposes to do, I think can be really useful. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to address the reason I'm coming here and why I'm working with Annie-san is simply because we need to have a global picture of this topic in the context of Japanese industries and airlines. Before, we do not have global picture. We only have each segment, and segment says something which is very difficult to connect to the future challenge or future improvement or future solutions. So what I'm trying here is to provide you the whole picture. In particular, it is very difficult for Japanese audience to listen this kind of argument or discussion, in particular through Japanese media. So I hope by coordinating this policy dialogue as well as explaining what Japanese government is doing, then you could find something, oh, we could have a much clearer picture than before. And you could find out some kind of holistic solution. You know, during this year, after joining this forum, I listened so many times, holistic, holistic, holistic. That means in this field, everything is not holistic. So everybody want to say the necessity of unified or coordinated approach to, overcome the obstacles. So I'd like to continue, not only me, but my team want to continue to discuss and coordinate with your side to further expand the notion of collaboration with the whole picture, covering not only developed countries, but also developing countries. In that context, I think the concept of green lane is quite important. And if we could expand it, not only within our relationship, but also for the other countries through ICAO, I think it will be a very beneficial and it could be a very positive signal for the country which is now wandering. Thank you.
It reminds me of terminology that we hear elsewhere in our industry of perhaps common approaches but differentiated where they need to be. So a common but differentiated approach is probably likely needed worldwide. So, all right, Jeff, so Annie said not de-risking, but a large part of what your team does is de-risking. It's not the concept of removing risk, it's lowering risk. Jeff, you got some wrap-up comments with respect to anything you heard?
Well, first let me say, the first thing that Annie said was really focused on cost, and I couldn't agree more there, that what we want to do is work together to lower the cost, so that's one less barrier. And I'll just sort of echo, Jimmy, something that you said, and Steve, a sentiment that you kind of captured, which is that we look at our job as facilitating the creation of an ecosystem, creating a marketplace where we're able to support scaling, we're able to support production, we're able to de-risk, sorry, Annie. But to your point, I think I like your idea of sharing the risk, of lowering that. That's really, I think, the spirit of what we're after. We look at our job in the renewables space broadly across the board as being a partner in something that is private sector led but government enabled, and that's the beauty and the power of the Inflation Reduction Act for us, is that it gives us so much firepower to enable so much of the work that you're talking about, and to continue to support companies that are doing this work through grants, through loans, through prize awards, and really just through lending our voice of support for the work that's being done. And so that's how I think what we're doing is at this moment in time so important. I'm happy to also say that the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation have never worked more closely together than we do right now across the board, but in particular in the aviation space.
And any comments with respect to working with your Japanese counterparts?
I certainly welcome further collaboration. I think I agree that this type of forum is the exact right approach. Welcome more of this dialogue, and hopefully it will lead to some specific outcomes, perhaps some very specific collaborations that we're very much open to.
All right. Rebuttal, go ahead.
Yes. Well, thank you, Annie. I think, yes, the risking should not be seen as eliminating all risk. I mean, we're talking about just partial risk guarantees or risk sharing, as you said. But the key thing here is to let the different entities take the risk that they can bear. So we want to crowd in private capital into this kind of investment, which naturally they see that as a risky venture. So the role of the public sector, or the role of this concessional finances and government grants, is really to, for example, to take first loss guarantee. So if the venture doesn't loses, then they take the first hit, so that the private sector then minimizes its own exposure. So that's one. And then also many of these financial institutions also have guarantees. So like in our case, we have what we call MIGA, or even within the World Bank, we have, it's a partial risk guarantee, because we don't want to guarantee 100%, because that just leads to all kinds of moral hazard and not a good thing. So I agree with you, Annie. It's not about eliminating all risk, but it's about using the available source of funds into the right function. So you don't want to use scarce public resources in investing in a SAF facility when the private sector can do it through appropriate risk sharing mechanism. I hope I explained that.
Shiyuki, anything you want to add?
Of course. Yes. Your counterpart in Japan will be maybe an energy agency. Of course, we already have a very, very close coordination and daily conversation with energy agency compared to other sectors. So, and before coming here last June, Annie-san kindly invited to your colleague to our discussion. So it was very helpful for me to find out broad picture of US government policies. So this kind of collaboration is quite important, and please, Japanese audience, we Japanese government is seriously thinking to tackle these very challenging issues with US government. So be assured to invest with de-risked scheme. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
All right. Saburo, anything on your side?
Yeah, probably the other element that we probably didn't discuss is probably time. And I love the conversation or narrative around, private sector led and government enabled. But there's also issues where it has to be government led, not just. There's a lot of secondary issues that we have to deal with. Anything from safety and operational regulations, perhaps not the most exciting topic, or if you're talking about e-fuels in the future, cross-border carbon accounting, certification, all that type of stuff. So that's certainly, we would like to work with all governments. So really looking forward to the active conversation. Thank you so much.
There's one other thing that we didn't necessarily talk about, but I know it's an issue today with respect to what might be about 20 projects that are poised for starting their commercialization journey, and that is the length, the duration of policy support. Policy support doesn't have to, cover all challenges, but when it doesn't cover the tenor of the loan, it's really problematic. And so, Jimmy, last word to you with respect to how things are going, working with the Japanese, making it happen. Billion gallons, right?
Billion gallons, yeah. We did commit, just the reference there is when the White House here in the US announced a 3 billion gallon target by 2030. We were at the press conference and announced 1 billion gallons of that will come from our technology. And the good news is we have line of sight into how we're going to do that by 2030. I think the final message for me is one of urgency, right? The tagline I left you with, "Someday is now," means that we can't wait to tackle this issue someday, and that we actually have the wherewithal to do it today, and we need to do it today. So when governments like Japan, frankly, are considering a 2030 mandate, what that really translates to is folks are going to wait until 2030 to comply, right? We're not seeing the activity sooner than 2030. So the notion of having some interim targets is important. Maybe there's a 5% target by 2027. That helps get the industry moving in the right direction. So just the thought around urgency, we have to decarbonize. Our world is to some degree falling apart. And we have things that we can do today to actually make a pretty big difference in decarbonizing important sectors like aviation.
Okay, I have 0 minutes to do my summary. I'm going to default back to Jimmy, the structure you laid out, because I think it's just encompassing, right? It's the concept that innovation is required across all of these areas. Continued technological development, policy, including technology neutral policies that reward the behavior that we're after, in models, in funding, in consumers and finance structures, et cetera. Again, we're early days in this industry. It's hard to be patient, but there's a lot of good things coming down the pipeline, and collaboration between Japan and the US can help with many of those challenges that are out there, and I look forward to helping the industry work all of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanka, and thank you all of our panelists. What a wonderful discussion that was. This is the end of our program. We would appreciate your feedback at the survey at your seats or via an email that we'll send shortly. The contents of this symposium will be put up on the GTUS website in the next few days if anyone is interested. In addition, if you enjoy the symposium, please feel free to join our mailing list and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, we're on it all. We are hosting a reception in the foyer, so if you want to stay, enjoy some food. We have sushi, we have sake. So if you'd like to stay, we would love to have you, and we'll have a few short words of welcome from our president. And thank you so much again. We hope you have a nice night. Thank you.